everybody, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to color grade another Apolog iPhone 16 Pro clip in DaVinci Resolve. This is the clip that I'm going to be working on today, and I'm gonna go for a pretty moody, cold and blue look. I actually have here a reference frame that I downloaded online, and I think this grade is gonna match very well my clip because the environment is more or less the same. This is a jungle. This is also a jungle, and most importantly, the lighting is also very similar. I shot this early in the morning at around 8-9 in the morning, and I think this shot as well was shot pretty early in the morning. So let's start. First thing I'm going to do is apply my Apolog Node 3. So for the first two nodes, I have here a CST in and then a CST out to convert Apolog to Rec 709. For the CST in, I'm going from Rec 2020 Apolog to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate because it's the widest color space available within DaVinci Resolve. And for the CST out, I'm going from DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate to Rec 709. All right, I think the first thing I'm going to do here is adjust the exposure because as you can see, this is pretty dark. And by the way, the reason why it's dark is because I shot this a couple of days after buying the new iPhone, and I watched a couple of tutorials on Apolog, and some guy recommended underexposing Apolog for the best results, but I don't agree with this at the moment, but just explain to you why it looks dark like this. And also, even if you expose your shot like this, very dark with Apolog, you can still recover all that information without introducing too much noise. Let me show you. So let me go to my exposure node in here, and I'm gonna go to the HDR wheels, and I'm gonna use the global wheel to globally adjust the exposure. And I'm just gonna go up until I'm satisfied, which is about here. Roughly 1.8 stops of exposure I added to this shot, which usually should introduce a lot of noise. But if I'm going to zoom in here to the darkest parts of the frame, and I'm going to gently scrub through, you will see that there is barely any noise, if any, to be honest. And I think this is because Apple has very good noise reduction processing with Apolog, which is one of the reasons why I actually love Apolog so much. So again, ideally, I would expose my shots properly, but even if you slightly underexpose your shots, it's totally fine because you can always recover everything in post-production with minimal amount of noise added to the shadows. And by the way, if you want to watch a video on how to properly expose Apolog, click here. All right, next, I think I'm going to add some contrast. I'm going to use this contrast node in here, and I'm gonna go to the primaries, color wheels, and just use this contrast slider in here. Something like this looks fine. This is the before and after. Next, I'm going to add some saturation, and recently I've been experimenting with a new way to add saturation. I learned that again from the YouTuber Colin Kelly. Basically, the way it works is first you have to set the color space of the node to HSV, and then disable channel 1 and 3, and only use the primaries, specifically the gamma and the gain, to add saturation. I'm still experimenting with this to see if it delivers better results, but this is the way I'm going to add saturation today. So again, I'm going to just bring up the gamma wheel to add some saturation and also bring up the gain. This is the before and after, before and after. All right, next, I'm going to fix the white balance because the white balance in this shot is very off. It looks a bit too red and also too yellow, and I think this is because I was using ND filter with my iPhone on that specific day. So I'm gonna go to my balance node in here. This node, by the way, is set, the gamma of it is set to linear, and I'm just going to use the gain wheel to adjust the white balance. So let me take this point in here and just go to the blue and like green until I'm happy, which is somewhere around here. Beautiful. This is the before and after, before and after. All right, next I have here a skin node where I usually adjust the skin tones, but because I don't have any skin tones in here, I'm gonna skip using this node. And beneath that, I have an empty node, which I usually use for HSL colors, like specifically targeting specific colors in the frame, and I'm gonna do that later after applying a lot. And then here I have power windows to target exposure and stuff, and maybe like color adjustments to specific areas of the frame, which I am definitely going to do with this shot. So the first thing that I'm gonna probably fix here with a window is reducing the exposure on this statue, because if I'm gonna pause the video right here, this and this looks almost equally bright, at least to my eyes. On the waveform, there's a big difference, but to my eyes, when I'm looking at the display, they look almost equally bright, and I want the viewer to right away focus on the subject, which in this case is this statue in here. So to fix that, I'm gonna put the video somewhere around here, select power window 1, then go to my windows, select the pen tool, and then create a mask around this statue. Maybe actually I'm going to fix it slightly around here. Then I'm gonna go to my tracker and just track this selection. Now it did an okay job, but I can make it even better. So I'm gonna switch to frame to specifically adjust each frame of the tracking. So I'm gonna switch to frame, and then I'm gonna move it around here, and then go right. And then here I'm gonna make it wider. Something like that, maybe this a bit lower. Keep going right to about here, I would say. Go down here and just increase the mask. And this looks good. So let me see how it looks from the start to finish. So it starts like this, then it basically expands, and awesome. Now I'm gonna switch back to clip to affect the whole clip and not just frame by frame. Then I'm gonna go to my masks again, and I'm gonna soften the mask in here to create like a feathering effect around the mask. Gonna do like 40 on the feathering. Let me disable the preview of the mask. And now I'm gonna go to my HDR wheels and reduce the exposure to make it darker, as you can see. So now it looks much better because my eyes right away go to the statue in the middle in here, whereas before they were almost equally bright. Also, I think I'm going to increase the density by using the color slice density slider in here, just to make it even more dark. Maybe something like 0.5 on the density. And honestly, I'm done. Let me just play it back to see that everything looks correct. Yeah, everything looks fantastic, and it's mainly because I tracked everything frame by frame, and also because I added the softness in here, which created a nice feathering effect for the exposure adjustments and also the density adjustments. All right, another thing that I can fix in here is this part, which is a bit bright. Again, it's almost equally bright as the statue, and again, I want the viewer to focus right away on the statue as much as possible. So I'm gonna do the same thing which I did with this selection in here. I'm gonna go around here, select power window 2, then create like a pen selection thing. Go to my tracker, start tracking, and then here I will have to fix it a little bit. So again, I'm gonna switch to frame, and I'm just gonna fix the tracking selection in here. All right, something like this is okay. It's not perfect. I can work on it a bit more. I kind of got confused in here, but it's gonna work just fine because I'm gonna only slightly reduce the exposure, and that's it. So again, I'm gonna select clip in here to affect the whole clip. Then I'm gonna go to the windows in here and add some softness. 40 works fine. Go to my HDR wheels and slightly reduce the exposure. Just a little bit, something like this. Now let me preview this 1 second. It's not distracting, it's not noticeable at all, to be honest, but if I am gonna put my video around here and select these two nodes, these two power windows, and do a before and after, there's a big difference. Also, I think I'm going to add another window in here for this statue itself. I think it's a bit too hot, too bright. So let me add another parallel node, and then I'm going to add another pen selection mask around this. And now I'm gonna start tracking this. And if it's like going all over the place here, it's totally fine because I don't really care about this. I only care about this tracking in here when you actually start seeing the Buddha statue in here. So let me put it around here to see that I'm not affecting this part. And I'm gonna go to my qualifier, select Luma, which I think it's this one, to only affect the luminance of the shot, of the selection. And as you can see right now, I'm affecting with this mask the statue of the Buddha in here and also the other statue which was in the foreground. But if I'm gonna go here and only select the brightest parts of the image, which is about here, now I'm only affecting the statue mostly. Maybe a little bit on the Buddha, but it's not gonna matter that much. Maybe I can go around here and slightly increase the softness. About like this, and maybe also slightly do this. Gonna click Shift H, and now I'm also going to add some blur radius in here to make the selection a bit more gradual and soft. And also I'm going to slightly denoise this and maybe add a bit of a post filter. Let me put it here to 100% so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna go to my primaries, reduce the gain, and slightly increase the gamma. Something like this, just to take off that, very hot like highlights, super bright highlights. I think something like this looks better. This is before and after, before and after. It's a very minor difference, but if I'm gonna zoom in, you'll see that before, like especially in here, it was just too bright, at least for me. And also just to make it a bit sharper, I'm gonna use this mid detail thing and just increase the sharpness only on the Buddha. Let's do it like 25. And now let me preview everything on a big screen just to see that everything looks fine. Yeah, I don't see any problems. So let me select again all of these 3 windows and do a before and after, before and after. Now the main subject of this shot pops a lot more from the background than before. All right, next is going to be the fun part where I'm going to actually start color grading and add this blue tint to the shot, because right now it looks very clean, but it doesn't have like a specific look to it like in this shot. So the way I'm gonna do this actually is by using the built-in plugin called Film Look Creator inside DaVinci Resolve. It's free, it's built in, but you have to use the DaVinci Resolve Studio version to access this plugin. And I'm gonna put it in here where I usually put my enhancer node. All right, so I'm gonna rename this FLC, Film Look Creator, and I'm gonna go to my plugins and select Film Look Creator. Apply this, but I'm gonna start with a clean slate to exactly dial in what I want. The first thing I'm going to do is increase the Film Look blend to 100% and select one of the presets in here. Usually I go for this one, Rochester, but let me see the other ones. This one looks nice with this shot. This is a bit too warm. This one looks nice. Elated, which is more green, and Vintage. I think I'm gonna select the Akasaka. Skin bias, I'm not gonna touch this. I don't have any skin in here, and later on I'm gonna come back to this empty node in here and adjust specific colors in the shot. So let me also put this frame in here just to see what I'm doing. Go to the Film Look Creator again, and I'm also probably going to shift the white balance towards blue because this shot in here is kind of blue. So let me go with the white balance slider in here and just push it towards blue. Let's go like 5700 just to be safe. Okay, so now we are much closer to this shot. Subtractive saturation, I'm not gonna touch. Tint, I might add a bit of magenta to this shot. Let me see. Maybe like 5 points, so 15 instead of 10. Something like this. Actually a bit less, like 13. This I'm not gonna touch. This I'm also not going to touch, but I am going to add a bit of bleach bypass. Just because I like it. It basically adds like a black and white contrasty effect to the shot, but I'm gonna put it at 0.1. And also I think I'm going to add a fade because if I'm gonna look at this shot in here, it is quite faded. I mean, the shadows are very high compared to my shot. So I'm just gonna go in here and add a bit of fade to the shadows. Maybe like 0.65. All right, next I'm going to open this split tone tool, which I really like in the Film Look Creator plugin. I'm going to enable this, push the amount to 100%. It's going to look very bad. Then I'm going to push the pivot all the way to the right or left. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to go to the right because it's a bit easier. And I'm going to find this blue hue that this shot has, like blue teal greenish hue. And the way to do that is by playing around with the hue angle. So I think something like 25 maybe. It's gonna work fine. Obviously now it looks way too blue. So what I'm gonna do to fix that is reduce the amount to like 0.3, let's say. Still a bit too much. It's like 0.15. This is much better. And now, because I see a bit of warmth in the highlights, I'm going to play around with the pivot just to introduce some orange and warmth to my highlights in my shot. So I'm going to push it here. As you can see, the image becomes warmer because split tone is basically playing around with two opposite colors. So in this case, like blue and orange. So let me adjust this to about, I would say like 0.7. Let's do more towards the blue than the yellow. Actually less blue, 0.65. Okay, now it looks much more similar. My shot is a bit greener, I think, but it's very close. So let me maybe play around with the hue angle here, make it a bit more blue. Let's do like 30. Now it's better. And maybe I'm going to play around with the amount just to fix it. Let me see. Yeah, like 0.125. And again, I'm going to just play around with the hue angle here. It's like 33. And play around with the pivot. Something like 0.625. The rest here I'm not really going to touch. I mean, I can add a bit of grain maybe, just to make it a bit softer. As you can see, it makes the shot a bit softer in here. Maybe just slightly, let's put it to like 0.1. Just a little bit to take off the digital look. And maybe I'm also going to enable bloom, why not, but again, not too much. Let's put it about 15 in here. And then this, I'm gonna put about 0.25. Something like this. So before and after, before and after. If I'm gonna go closer in here, before and after, there's a minor difference that actually makes the face in here look slightly softer. Okay, now I'm gonna come back to this node where I said I'm going to target specific colors in the frame, and I'm gonna go to my color slice page. I prefer using this than the HSL curves because it's much quicker in my opinion. And let me open this frame again. And I think the first thing that I'm going to do is change the yellow color in here. So I'm gonna make it a bit more dense with the density slider in here. And by the way, I'm using the yellow menu option in here. Maybe slightly increase the saturation and also slightly play around with the hue. So I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be slightly warmer, I guess. Or actually slightly towards the green. Let's do a little bit towards the green. Maybe a bit warmer actually. I'm gonna do the same thing with the greens, increase the density, and maybe slightly increase the saturation. Play around with the hue in here. I'm not gonna touch this. Let me actually come back to this and play around with this a bit more. I don't like the color in here of the waterfall, so I'm gonna probably use the cyan in here and the blue to affect these colors. So first I'm going to desaturate this quite a lot, 0.7 on the saturation, and also the teal saturation to 0.7 as well, and increase the density of these colors to about here. And maybe also the colors in here, the reds, which are going to be in here, the skin colors. Let me increase the density here, slightly increase the saturation like this, and play around with the hue slider. Actually, I'm gonna leave it as is. Reds, I'm not gonna touch that much. Magenta, maybe I'm gonna slightly desaturate the magenta here just to clean up everything in here. Let me show you right here. So I'm gonna put it about 0.7. Looks great. And this is the before and after, before and after. Now we are much closer to the reference frame, but my shot is definitely less faded and more contrasty and also a bit darker. So the way I'm gonna add more fade is by going here to my trim node. Then I'm gonna open my curves, select only the Y, basically only the luminance. Make sure my editable splines are on, and I'm gonna just take this point in here and raise it up. Let me open the reference frame again, put it around here, something like this. I basically just raise the shadows up, the luminance of the shadows, and I'm going to bring back some contrast. Okay, now it looks very off, but I'm gonna bring this down as well to compress the highlights and bring back the contrast from the highlights as well. Yeah, it looks almost the same in terms of the fade, but it's still a bit darker, slightly darker. So I think I'm gonna come back to my HDR wheels, to my exposure node, and just put it to about 2 here, like this. And I'm gonna come back to my trim node and just slightly reduce the contrast on the highlights to have a smoother roll off. Let's see this. Yeah, now it looks much better. But the color in here is very off to the color in here. Like you can see, this shot has like this blue tint to it, whereas my shot is more purple. So let me go to the Film Look Creator again, open the split tone and slightly adjust the hue angle. Maybe something, put it to about 40 and play around with the pivot. Maybe this looks better. Yeah, this looks a bit better. I think it's less purple than before. Before it was very purple, but now it looks pretty similar, to be honest. And maybe I'm actually going to warm up the highlights a bit more. Let me go to this empty node in here, go to my primaries and just add more yellow to the highlights and remove the green slightly. A bit less, and maybe also add some blue to the midtones. Okay, this looks a bit better, but it's a bit too intense. So I'm gonna go to this section in here, which basically allows you to adjust the intensity of the node. And I'm gonna open the reference frame side by side. Let me do it side by side like this and just play around with the intensity of this node. Let's put it like 0.65. I think looks fine. Also, maybe just because I'm seeing this red in the shadows, let me try to add another node after the Film Look Creator. Go to my primaries, log wheels, and try to remove the red from the shadows. It's basically the log wheels allow you to precisely adjust colors and exposure to shadows, midtones, and highlights. So let me try to do that. Just remove this red a little bit and maybe this green. And add some blue. Let's see how it looks now. Now I get this tint in here, you see in the shadows. This slight blue tint, which I wanted to achieve. Because in this frame, it's quite blue in here in the shadows. I think something like this looks good, honestly. I mean, I can sit around and play with it more and more and more. Maybe I'm going to slightly increase the exposure actually. Just as a final touch with the fade trim node in here. Yeah, something like this honestly looks good to me. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be informative. If you have any tips, questions or comments, let me know down below, and I guess I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.